Okay, so centering basics. This is a little bit bigger piece of clay than you're using, but it'll make it easier to see. So the first thing is I take my piece of clay and I want to make it into a ball. Little divots or little creases like that don't matter, but if it's like a deep crease like that, you want to be sure that you close it up. Then I want to make it into kind of an egg shape. I do that with my hands, like in a V. Is this all still in the frame, or I need to be down closer? Yeah. Okay. Put the clay in the middle, and manually now I'm pushing the clay toward the middle and pushing the clay down. So I'm bringing this edge here down closer to the bat. If this had been off by an inch, as I started to spin it manually, I'd push it back toward the middle. I want this to be kind of in the middle, right? It's less work I have to do centering if it's kind of in the middle. If it's off, already going like this, that's more work I have to do centering. So, power. Okay. So I wet my hands, I wet the clay. Water's the lubricant. You want this to be slippery as it's going through your hands. If it starts to drag against your hands, you get a little bit more water. You can't use too much water, you can't use too little. I just wet my hands and wet the clay, but you can go like that. The splash pan will catch it. So first thing I need to do is to seal the clay to the vat. And I'm pushing kind of with the blades of my hands, just right down near the bottom, maybe from an inch up, down, just pushing down a little bit, squeezing in a little bit, pushing down a little bit. I want this edge to be sealed and feathered. So I'm pushing in and down. I'm a, 45-ish degree angle, 60-degree angle. I'm pushing in and down so that this spot where the clay meets the bat feathers out into it. It's completely sealed, no water can get under it. If the water gets under it, it'll eventually loosen up and pop off. So centering is 3 steps. It's a 3-step process. The first step is taking this bottom finger width, so it's like a 1/2 inch. You can ignore all of this. And I do it by pulling toward myself. See, my arms are on my legs, which gives me added stability. I'm pulling toward myself. My only goal is to get that bottom 1/2 inch. I'm not touching the clay up here at all. That bottom 1/2 inch, less wobbly, more centered. You can do it pushing in this way. Then I'm gonna push the clay up from the bottom, and I'm gonna do it first with one hand so you can see. I'll rotate a little bit so you can see in my hand. So I've got these 2 fingers hooked into that groove, and I'm squeezing right from the bottom. I'm squeezing against this part of my hand, like the clay is a ball that I'm squeezing. I'm starting right from the bottom and following that clay up. All the pressure's down here. So I'm moving the clay up, continuing from what was the most centered part of the clay, that I pushed this in to be a little bit less wobbly, a little bit more centered. Now when I normally do that, I'm doing it with both hands, so I'll do it that way in a minute. So I'm gonna first do this the way I hold my hands, which is I'm gonna push down with my left hand into my right hand. So my right hand here is still squeezing. It's squeezing enough. You can see little subtle grooves here from my fingers. At the same time I'm squeezing a little, my left hand comes to the top and pushes down. You can see how this thumb's out of the way. This hand just kind of goes into this space, but it's only on half the clay. It's not over the whole top. And for smaller pieces of clay, It's like this rounded edge goes right into this groove in your hand. So I'm squeezing the clay, I'm pushing down. I'm also gonna push away from myself a little bit, see how I can kind of lean the clay over a little. So at the same time, this hand's pushing away from me and squeezing, this hand's pushing away a little bit and pushing down. So what I'm doing is my left hand is pushing the clay into the shape of my right hand. The right hand's acting like a form, like a mold. I mean, I'm using a hand. I could have some contraption set up here that has a curved piece of wood or metal that I have on a hinge that I just press in here and push down into. Same thing, your hand is acting like that. So that was step 3. Step 1's the bottom, step 2's up, step 3 is down. I do step 1 at the end of pushing down. So I'm pushing down, and then I hook my fingertips down here and pull this in at the end. So there's step 1 again. Then going up again here from the bottom. Normally I'd have the blade of my hand, this bottom part of my hand would also be in that bottom groove. They're pushing up together. So this hand's squeezing and pushing to the center, this hand's pushing to the center. The same, leaning it over a little bit, pushing it down. Okay, that's my hand position. The other way is, again, pull in at the bottom or push in at the bottom. If you do this and the bottom gets a little less wobbly, a little more centered, the top will get more wobbly because I've changed the foundation down here. So the other way is to use your left hand as the form that you're going to push the clay into. And the alignment of your hand, your arm and your hand is draw a line straight down your arm, out your palm, through the middle of the clay. Should be a line of force that you're pushing in the clay right on that line. And then the right hand's doing pretty much the same thing. I mean, I'm squeezing in from the bottom, pushing up, but the left hand is pushing in from that spot on the palm. And then pushing down, I'm going to push down into the left hand is now the form instead of the right hand. And again, I'm just pushing down on half the clay. You can do this with these hands like they're touching, like this. Pushing away and down. You could do it again with the pad of the thumb with the right hand, just like I did over here. You know, people will do it with a fist. Doesn't matter. But however you're pushing down, you want whatever it is to be at a slight angle so that this stays slightly domed. You don't want to push this down from the center flat like that. You wind up with this concave part on the top, which is hard to work with. So using this hand position, the left hand up. Notice either way I stop squeezing and stop going up when this hand is it's here, it's below the top. Don't go all the way up off the top. That also is another way you'll kind of fold this outside of the clay up and wind up with a concave top. You want the top to always stay rounded a little bit. I'm feeling some right hand's at a slightly raised, I mean, it's exactly at that angle. Yeah. So it could be a little steeper depending on, you know, how your hands work. But again, you don't want it on the middle. And you want your hands to touch. However you're doing this, your hands are you want your hands to be touching. You know, don't get into this. Again, when your hands are touching, you've got the stability of the triangle from your shoulder girdle through your arms, where if your hands are like this, anything can happen. Push it down. At this stage, you want the clay to be wider than it is tall when you start to open it. I do this with my left hand. I have an engineer brain along with the potter brain. My dad was an engineer, my mom was a painter. So it occurs to me in both ways. So anyway, so I use my left hand to open here because my left hand's always the one working inside, but it doesn't matter. Clay doesn't care whether it's your left hand finger, right finger. Again, notice my hands are touching. You can do your thumb and a finger. You do two thumbs. However you do this, you want this hole to be larger than your finger. So if I'm doing this with one finger, I want the hole to be the same size as if I push down with two fingers. You're just taking that one out. And in order for this to stay in that position, I have to be pulling toward my body just a little bit as I'm going down. If I pull too far, a little nub will start to show up in the middle. That just means relax and move back toward the middle a little bit. Go down in stages. So 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch at a time. Take a little pause. Feel it, make sure it still feels centered all the way down. All right, so there I pulled a little toward myself too much. There's the little nub. You want the bottom to be 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch for a pot this size. To check the bottom, take the water out. Get my needle, put some slip on the needle. Stop the wheel. Push this into the bottom and take it out. And I don't know if you can see there, but the needle's clean. And there's a little bit of a bump right there. That's how thick the bottom is. So I've centered the clay. I made a hole, opened it. Now I'm gonna make a bottom. I'm gonna open that bottom up from the hole with my fingers to a flat bottom. I'm pulling straight toward myself. My fingers are in this shape. I'm pulling with my fingertips, not like this. So there's a little bit of a indent down there, kind of like if you go to the beach along cliffs and they're a little, you see where the waves are kind of carved away right at the bottom. That's kind of how this is. I'm pulling toward myself. The whole thing's opening. Don't worry about whatever happens here, this kind of donut-y shape. Some people get worried about it and they try to hold it in. Just leave it alone, let it do whatever it does. And I smooth out the bottom. I do that with the pads of my fingers here. So in order for it to use the pads of my fingers instead of my fingertips, I go straight across that way, which lets me get the whole pads of the fingers down against the clay. All right, next is to cone this up. Now I'm gonna move around this way so you can see my fingers in there. So I'm primarily using my thumb and these two fingers, and I'm gonna push in. But I put a sponge in front of these two fingers. I'm not kind of holding this and trying to push the sponge in. I'm actually pushing through the sponge. And I'm starting at the bottom. You can do this with no hand inside. I have my fingers in there that are just kind of going along for the ride, but they're not pushing out. So if my fingers are inside, 95% of the pressure is from the outside. If my finger's out, obviously 100% of the pressure is from the outside. But I'm not squeezing. These fingers are just sitting there, and this is coming up along the fingers. And I'm drawing a line toward a point up here. The purpose of coning is to counterbalance the centrifugal force of the spinning wheel, so that as I move forward, I can actually control the shape of the pot. And now I'm ready for the claw. So the claw is how the clay gets raised, and it happens by stretching, not by squeezing. So I'm gonna do it, then I'm gonna take my hands out and show you. So I've got a specific hand position here. Inside hand is higher than the outside hand. The inside thumb is touching the outside hand someplace. I like it as close to the clay as I can get it. And they come up together. Up a straight line. The inside hand reaches the top first. Okay. So you saw it get taller. This is the magic of making pots. Everything else is preparation to get to here. So that was just adding water to the outside. Okay, so my hand's here. The inside hand is higher than the outside hand. And my thumb is over touching on this hand someplace. The reason the clay gets taller is not from squeezing it up, it's from stretching. So here, my inside hand pushes out. You see this bump right there? That's my inside hand pushing out over the outside hand. And it's this inside hand pushing out that stretches the clay. It's the stretching of the clay that makes it thinner, just like a rubber band. When you stretch it, it gets thinner. Exact same thing's happening here. And now I'm gonna keep pushing out with the outside hand. That bump should remain all the way up. Inside hand is above the outside, all the way up. Now that I'm at the top, it gets, the stretch isn't as much. But you'll see that the two things you'll see is you'll see that bump go all the way up the side of the pot, and you'll see your inside fingers get to the top before the outside fingers. If both of those things are happening, your hands are in the right position. As the clay gets thinner, it's easier to see the bump and the offset, the overlap.
Now, did you just do a second one just to show us, like you were fine with it?
I'm just making it a little taller.
You're just okay.
Yeah,
Gradually.
it does not even for me, it doesn't happen in one pull, except for little tiny pots. A pot this size, like if this was a big mug or a plant or something like that, I'd take 2 or 3 pulls.
Okay.
Yeah. So, once your hand is in position, there was a student of mine years ago that named this the claw. I like it because it's like you get your hands in this position, they don't move. It's like they lock in the position, like you brought in this little metal contraption and went, and then a string pulled it up. So our brains are wired to pay attention to pressure. You have to retrain your brain to pay attention to the gap between your fingers and let the pressure vary as you go. If the clay's thicker, you'll feel more pressure. If you get to a thinner spot, you'll feel less pressure. But it's maintaining the same gap between your fingers that has the wall be even, the thickness be even. And at this point, if you can go through this process of raising the clay, and you see it go out, get a 1/4 of an inch taller each time, that's fine. Because it's for you to learn, for your body, for this to be second nature for your body to do this, you just have to do it over and over and over again, and over and over and over again, and over and over and over again. So, it's like you're learning to maintain the same position. And each time I'm not applying, like it's not as much of an overlap. I'm not, going for too much clay, just a little bit. The more you overlap, the more is going to happen at once, because the more you stretch the clay, the more you push this. And the reason that making a cylinder is I'll just say it, the right place to start, is once you can do this, you can then learn to do anything. this is the beginning of being able to really control making a bowl, to be able to make rounded shapes. Like it all starts from here. I mean, certain other shapes like a bowl, you start changing it before it's this tall. They all start as a cone and a little cylinder. And I think that's it. Let me do the kind of clean up, like how do you get this off the wheel now and so forth. So with the wheel spinning, clean all the slip off the bat, take the slip out of the inside of the pot. If this is still big enough to get your hand in, start in the middle. Notice my hands are still touching, they're always touching. I started in the middle and just slowly went out. I'm not pushing down to change the thickness. I'm just gently going across the whole thing. Takes out a little bit of slip, but the main thing is this clay has sand in it, and it pushes the sand down so that the bottom's smooth. Take this wooden stick, hold it like a pencil. Use two hands. Don't grip it up here because now you're telling this to happen. Get your hands kind of together. All you want to do right here is just make a little notch at the bottom. The softest clay when you're done is that little bit of clay that's right at the bottom of the clay against the bat. It's been sitting there absorbing water for the whole time you're working. So you get that out of there. You use these, you put the wire on your baby fingers so you can stretch it, hold it tight, thumb or index finger, pull it through, maybe twice. And then I use like 6 points, thumb, long finger, and this ring finger is bent over, so they're 6 points. Pick it up, move it. If you want to go back and re-round it a little bit, it's still soft clay. Okay,